Lestat tries to get back into the family. Claudia is out for blood. And in Dubai, Malloy has a startling realization. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is The Fandom Realm. And today I'm going to review episode 6 of Interview with the Vampire. Just remember, please subscribe to the channel. It'll help us out a ton. And also remember, this is a spoiler review, so just be warned. So, looking at this episode 6 of Interview with the Vampire, I think it's first important to look at where we left off last episode. Last episode ended with Lestat flying Louis up into the clouds. He takes him up into the sky and drops Louis, trying to do major damage to him. Coming into this episode, actually we're going to get to see the aftermath of that. Louis is basically at home and he's being helped by Claudia. He is recovering. He's sort of reminiscing about basically everything that had happened to cause the fight. And I mean, he's head to toe pretty severely damaged. He's in a lot of intense pain as well. His lungs were damaged. He really looked like he took a big hit. Claudia really takes very good care of Louis. She's going to help him to recover as quickly as possible. It took almost 2 months, and he could finally read and sit and stand and do some things on his own. All the while this is happening, we get to see Lestat trying to get back into their lives. He comes by their house. He's going to try to call. He does all kinds of things to get back in. He is eventually going to visit the house. Louis and Claudia don't show any interest in welcoming him in, even though he was bringing gifts. At certain points, I think it was a book for Louis. He also brought a car. And we basically find out some years are passing. After a long time, you're going to have a situation where Lestat is going to send his first recorded composition. He's going to send that to Louis, and he basically fell in love with him again. Now, there was a problem here because there was a woman singing on this composition, and she's going to cause a lot of trouble. Finally, Lestat is going to be allowed back, and they're going to set some rules. Claudia and Louis are going to set some rules. Basically, as he comes back in, we're going to find out some interesting information about Lestat, and he names his sire, and that sire's name was Magnus, and he basically goes through and tells his creation story. He says that he was abducted by Magnus when he was a child. Later on, Magnus is going to turn Lestat and then threw himself into a fire. So basically, after that, Lestat's going to be alone, and he's going to be going through everything that Louis went through early on, especially that idea of not really wanting to kill to get that blood for food. Another one of the rules that Claudia is going to set for Lestat is that he has to kill his new lover, Antoinette. Antoinette was the female voice on that recording that was sent to Louis earlier on. Eventually, we're going to see that Lestat is going to give Antoinette's finger to Claudia as a souvenir. Claudia's going to take the ring that was on the finger, and with that, it looked like Lestat had done what they wanted him to. However, we're going to find out that actually Lestat had turned Antoinette. At some point, Claudia and Louis follow Lestat after Lestat had gone out hunting, and they find Antoinette still alive. Of course, this is going to enrage Claudia, and she's had enough of Lestat by this time and his lies. And now she basically wants to leave. She goes out with Louis, and she leaves. She wants to go travel around the world. She even tried to get Louis to come with her. But Louis, he's going to stay with Lestat. Claudia is going to board a train. They really think she's going somewhere into Europe, but Lestat's going to find her, and he's going to bring her home. His idea here was that Claudia was not going to be able to go since it was difficult on Louis, and she had to stay. She was the one that was able to comfort him. Lestat could not comfort him. Claudia could. We are eventually going to get to see Claudia and Lestat playing chess, and she is going to beat him. And boy, does it tick him off. but we're also going to see them having a psychic conversation about killing Lestat. So, I think this is going to be coming up pretty soon for us. In an episode is at least them attempting to kill Lestat. Don't know if they'll pull it off or not, but it's got to be coming at some point. And just for Lestat telling that story about Magnus, his sire, you sort of wonder if Lestat is wanting to stick around or if he's wanting somebody to kill him. That's just sort of a feeling I get. I don't know if it's true or not. Back to present day. Basically, we get to see Daniel Malloy meeting with Louis. They're still in Dubai, but Malloy is going to actually fall asleep, and he starts having a dream. And that dream it's more of a memory, actually. Basically, what happens is he's going to dream about that first time he had met with Louis years ago when Malloy was just a new reporter. Louis had told him that he was a vampire, and the big reveal here is that Louis's personal secretary, Rashid, was actually there at that meeting. And it's obvious Rashid has to be a vampire because he has not aged a day from that first meeting until what we see today. So this scene actually left a big unanswered question about really what is going on. Now, I just want to share a few of my feelings and reactions to some things that happened on this episode. The first thing is they are making every effort in the world to make Lestat, Louis, and Claudia into a dysfunctional family, and a family that is facing domestic issues, especially domestic violence. It's very much showing violence between Louis and Lestat. I mean, Lestat dropping Louis from all that height. Lestat sort of being that one person in a relationship when one's trying to break up and the other one just keeps sort of harassing them. That's very much seen. He's very abusive. We have to assume that when Lestat went and retrieved Claudia from the train, that he was abusive then as well, towards her possibly. And that whole relationship with Louis, Lestat, and Claudia just is very toxic, and they're really playing that up in this series. Now, while that's something that's negative, I think it's really worked because you're sort of seeing the pain, especially in Louis and Claudia's life, and the problems this abuser, which is Lestat, is causing. So I'm interested to see where they're taking this. It looks like they're trying to take it up to that domestic type situation that ends in violence towards the abuser. We know this episode, Louis and Claudia were very much talking about killing Lestat. And so that's something to look out for in the next few episodes. Now, just another general idea that sort of goes along with that is this whole idea of basically Louis feeling suffocated living in this relationship with Lestat. He really doesn't want to live with his maker. He does have a romantic relationship with him as well, and he's just never felt like he could move away. And even through these years that were depicted in this episode, when Louis was basically giving him the cold shoulder, it is sort of set up so that Louis was always going to go back to Lestat. And to that last point, this idea of Louis possibly getting away from Lestat and maybe not being meant for him. I mean, you've got to look. Louis had multiple opportunities to try to get out of town and start a new life elsewhere with Claudia. We know Claudia is very dedicated to Louis. And so because of that, basically, he had his chance to get out of town with Claudia. A lot of this may be because he's feeling very controlled by Lestat, maybe even a little scared of Lestat because of the entire issue with dumping him out of the air. And so basically this all goes back almost to the whole domestic violence type issue because Louis is too scared to get out of the relationship. And so I think that whole domestic violence storyline is going to play through the rest of the season. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is just this idea of killing Lestat. Of course, early on in the series, Claudia told Lestat that she was going to kill Lestat someday. And at first, basically, Louis sort of shrugged this off. He told her to stop herself being guided by emotions and think rationally. Louis knew that if Lestat could lie about things like flying and Antoinette, he could lie about other things like having a lot of other big powers. And so he's really going to move away from this idea of killing Lestat early on. But once you have Claudia, when she's sitting there talking to Louis while she's playing chess with Lestat, she tells Louis, I know you want to kill him too. And that is basically the moment that I think both of them realize at some point they're going to make a play to kill Lestat. And listen, his face did give it away. He will at some point make that attempt, probably with help from Claudia. And I do think it was very interesting a little bit earlier in this episode when Lestat was trying to get back into the house and they told him he could not tell any lies. Louis asked him a question that I thought was very interesting. And it's actually a question I had asked myself about what was going on. And that is about when Louis' brother committed suicide. I'm going to tell you, I thought completely at that time that somehow Lestat had coerced Louis' brother into jumping off of that house. And you know, although he apparently told them the truth that he had nothing to do with it, Lestat's a liar. And I think maybe we're going to get to hear that he did coerce Louis' brother. And that might be the trigger for Louis that really forces him over the edge to end up trying to kill Lestat. And actually, this is going to be the last idea here. And the last idea is, I thought it was very interesting. They've had, in modern day, Louis' personal secretary running around there, Rashid. And I've wondered what kind of relationship that you have. And you have to wonder if maybe Rashid and Louis, maybe they're in a relationship. Maybe they're not. Maybe he is just his personal secretary. But there's no doubt that Rashid has to be a vampire because he hasn't aged since Louis met with Malloy. Maybe he has been his personal secretary all these years, but you've got to think that it's probably a situation where, if nothing else, Louis is at least his sire. Now, with that, the entire episode overall, I really enjoyed. I think the writing has been pretty good for this entire series so far, but I thought this episode was really good. There were enough twists and turns and interesting things happening that I really enjoyed it. Not tons of action the entire series so far. There's not a ton of action, but you don't have to have action to have a lot of interesting things happen. And they are keeping basically all of the viewers sort of on this ride with, are they going to get back together? What is Lestat going to do today? Is Louis going to take him back? Is Claudia going to cause trouble? You can create drama that's very interesting that will replace lots of action. And so with that, I really did like this episode. With that, and because of those reasons, I'm going to give this episode today, let's go with an A-. Now, thanks for listening. Please, before you leave, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below. And I'll see you next time